She sat on a cold pavement near the old shopping street. Her back pressed against the wall, her eyes dull and empty. A thin blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, torn in places, and her fingers were red from the cold. People walked past her without a glance, some holding coffee cups, some laughing with friends. To them, she was just another homeless girl, another shadow in the city that no one really cared about. The girl's name was Lena, though no one there knew it. Her hair was long but tangled, a mix of gold and dirt that caught the faint light of the setting sun. She looked small, fragile even, but there was something quiet in her face that showed strength. She had been sitting in the same spot for 3 days, near an old street piano that no one used anymore. The paint on the piano was peeling, its keys yellowed by rain and time. Still, Lena stayed near it, like it meant something only she could understand. The crowd that passed her didn't think much. Some gave her strange looks, others whispered to each other. "She's probably crazy," someone said. "Maybe she's just looking for money," another guessed. But Lena didn't beg. She didn't even look up. Her hands rested on her knees, trembling slightly from the cold. The smell of roasted nuts and coffee drifted from nearby shops, making her stomach twist with hunger. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, but hunger was something she had learned to ignore. As night fell, the city lights flickered on, and the street musicians started packing up. The laughter grew louder from the nearby bar. A few drunk men passed by, one tossing a coin toward her feet. It rolled across the ground and stopped beside the piano pedal. Lena looked at it but didn't pick it up. She stared at the piano instead, its broken keys and faded wood calling to her like an old friend. For a long time she just watched it, her fingers twitching slightly, remembering something or someone from long ago. When she was younger, before everything went wrong, her mother used to play the piano in their small apartment. The sound was soft and warm, filling every corner with light. Lena had learned by watching her mother's hands move across the keys. She remembered laughing whenever her mother made a mistake. She remembered the smell of tea, the sound of rain on the window, the feeling of home, but all of that was gone now. Washed away in a fire that took everything, her home, her mother, her safety. She had been wandering since then, going from shelter to shelter, sometimes sleeping near train stations or under bridges. People had given her food a few times, but most days she was invisible. The world moved too fast to notice a girl like her. Still, every time she saw a piano, something in her heart stirred, like a memory that refused to die. That night, as the wind grew colder, Lena reached out and touched the piano's surface. Her fingers brushed away the dust. It was rough and cracked under her skin, but real. Her heartbeat quickened. For the first time in days, she felt something other than fear. She sat on the small wooden stool in front of the piano. The stool creaked softly. A few people nearby turned their heads, curious but amused. A woman holding a shopping bag stopped to watch. She whispered to her friend, "What is she doing?" A man laughed and took out his phone, ready to record. A group of teenagers giggled nearby, thinking it would be funny to film the homeless girl pretending to play. But Lena didn't care. She didn't hear their laughter. All she could hear was the echo of her mother's voice. "When the world forgets you, Lena, play." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The wind blew her hair across her face, her fingers hovering just above the dusty keys. Her hands shook not from fear, but from a strange excitement she didn't fully understand. The city noise faded behind her, the laughter, the cars, the footsteps, all of it disappeared. In that moment she wasn't a homeless girl anymore. She was a little girl again, sitting beside her mother, learning to play her first song. The people around her waited, still expecting her to make a fool of herself. A child pointed and laughed. A woman shook her head and kept walking. But Lena didn't move for a long time. She just sat there, her fingers frozen in the air, her eyes closed, listening to the silence before the storm. No one knew that the quiet girl they ignored was about to change everything. The cold street, the laughter, the judgment, all of it would soon fall silent when the first note broke through the night. And in that single note, the world would finally see her. Not as a homeless girl, but as something extraordinary. The crowd around the street piano grew thicker that evening. The city lights glowed like a sea of gold behind the people gathering to watch. Some came out of curiosity. Others just wanted to record something funny for their social feeds. The homeless girl sitting at the piano looked too thin, too fragile to do anything impressive. Her clothes were wrinkled, her shoes had holes, and her face was hidden behind messy hair. A teenage boy with a camera whispered to his friend, "Watch this. She's gonna mess up the first note." They both laughed. The group of tourists nearby smiled awkwardly, unsure whether to join in or walk away. Lena could hear every laugh, every whisper, but her fingers stayed on the keys. She didn't look up, not even once. Her mind was somewhere far away. Beyond the noise and the shame, the air around her felt heavy, the kind of silence before something happens. The piano itself seemed to wait with her, its broken keys waiting for her touch. Lena took a deep breath and pressed down. The sound that came out was rough, one note slightly out of tune. A few people snickered. Someone said loudly, "I told you, she can't play." The laughter returned, stronger now. But Lena didn't move away. She pressed another key, and then another and another. Suddenly, something changed. The harsh sounds began to melt into something smoother. Deeper, her hands moved faster. Her body leaned closer. The laughter faded, replaced by confusion. Her fingers, though red and stiff from the cold, moved like they remembered every rhythm, every melody that ever existed. The piano came alive under her touch. The boy with the camera slowly lowered his phone. His friend whispered, "Wait, she's actually good." The crowd that had gathered to laugh began to shift. People stopped talking, some moved closer. Drawn in by the unexpected beauty of the sound, Lena didn't see them. Her eyes were closed, and her lips moved silently as she played. The melody wasn't one from the radio. It wasn't something modern or popular. It was old, full of feeling. A story made of notes instead of words. Each sound carried sadness, love, and memories she could never say out loud. The piano was old, but it didn't matter. It responded to her hands like it had been waiting for her all along. The keys clacked softly under her fingers, the notes echoing between the stone buildings. A little girl holding her mother's hand stopped and stared. "Mommy, it's pretty," she whispered. Her mother nodded slowly, her eyes wide. Lena's hair fell over her face, her shoulders trembling as she played faster. The music rose higher, flowing like waves through the street. The vendors stopped calling out. The traffic noise faded into the distance. People who were passing by paused, turning their heads to see where that haunting tune was coming from. For the first time in a long time, Lena didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel small or broken. The piano was her voice, her heart, her truth. It spoke for her when she couldn't, telling the world everything she had held inside. The nights she cried under the bridge, the mornings she woke up freezing, the dreams she once had when her mother was still alive. A man wearing a black coat stopped across the street. He had gray hair and carried a violin case. He froze when he heard the melody. Something about it felt familiar. His eyes narrowed as he watched the girl's hands move. "It can't be," he whispered to himself. He stepped closer. Weaving through the crowd by now, the entire street had gone quiet. People stood shoulder to shoulder, phones out, but no one said a word. The laughter was gone, replaced by something close to awe. A few had tears in their eyes, and even those who had mocked her earlier now looked ashamed. The music slowed, her hands shaking slightly as the final notes echoed. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as the last note faded into the cold night, the silence broke. Not with laughter this time, but with applause. It started small. One pair of hands clapping softly, then another, then dozens more. Soon the whole street was clapping. Cheering and crying all at once, Lena opened her eyes, confused. The people who had mocked her moments ago were now shouting, "Bravo!" and "Play again." She looked at her trembling hands, then at the piano, then at the crowd that suddenly saw her, really saw her. Her lips parted slightly as if to say something, but no words came. She just smiled, small and shy, like someone who had finally been heard after years of silence. And somewhere in that crowd, the man in the black coat stood frozen, staring at her face. His eyes widened as realization struck him. The song, the way she played, it was too familiar to be coincidence. His heart pounded as he whispered her name under his breath, the name he hadn't spoken in years. The crowd kept cheering, but for him, time had stopped. He knew exactly who she was. Lena sat frozen on the piano stool, her heart racing. The sound of applause echoed around her, bouncing off the cold stone walls of the street. She didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to run. Part of her wanted to cry. Her fingers trembled, resting on the keys that still vibrated softly from the last note she played. The crowd was still cheering. People clapping, smiling, filming her with their phones. A few even shouted her name, though none of them truly knew it. The same strangers who had mocked her minutes ago were now treating her like a star. But Lena didn't play for fame. She played because the piano reminded her she was still alive. Play again. Someone called from the crowd. Another voice joined. Please, one more. The noise swelled again, warm and excited. Lena blinked at the faces around her. Faces that had once been full of laughter and judgment but now glowed with something else. Admiration, maybe even respect. Then, through the sea of people, Lena noticed the man in the black coat still standing at the edge of the crowd. He wasn't cheering, he wasn't recording. He was just staring, completely still. His eyes were locked on her, and for a reason she couldn't explain that made her chest tighten. He began walking closer, slow and careful, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too fast. Lena's heartbeat quickened. She didn't recognize him at first, but something about his face and the lines around his eyes, the sadness there, felt familiar. He stopped a few feet away, his lips slightly parted. That song, he whispered almost to himself. How do you know that song? Lena blinked, confused, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The crowd didn't notice their exchange. They were still talking among themselves, praising her talent, taking pictures. The man's voice grew firmer, trembling with emotion. That song. I wrote it. His hand moved to his chest, as if steadying his heart. I wrote it for my daughter. Years ago. Lena stared at him, her mind spinning. For a moment, the noise of the crowd faded away. The world seemed to narrow until there was only him and her. You wrote it? She asked softly. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. Yes, he said, tears gathering in his eyes. I wrote it for her when she was 8. She used to hum it all around the house. He paused, his voice breaking. She disappeared after the fire. I never found her. The word fire hit Lena like a storm. Her breath caught. The world tilted. The memories she had locked away for years came crashing back. The smoke, the heat, the screams, her mother's voice calling her name before everything went dark. Her lips trembled. My mom played this song, she said quietly. She said it was written for a little girl. Her eyes widened, realization dawning like light through clouds. She said it was called Lena's song. The man's hands shook, his eyes filled with disbelief and hope all at once. What did you say? Lena's song, she repeated, her voice breaking. My name is Lena. The man took a step forward, then another, until he was standing right in front of her. His breath trembled, his voice barely a whisper. Lena? She looked up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dad? The crowd noticed then, their chatter quieting as they sensed something happening. The man dropped to his knees beside the piano, his hands hovering near her face like he couldn't believe she was real. He reached out slowly, afraid she might disappear if he touched her. It's you, he whispered, my little girl. It's really you. Lena's hands flew to her mouth, tears falling faster now. The piano between them was silent, but it had already done its job. It had carried her voice to him after all these years. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them blurred, the city noise faded, and the only sound was the soft hum of the wind moving through the empty keys. The man pulled her into his arms, trembling. The crowd erupted again, this time not in laughter or applause, but in gasps and cheers. People were crying, strangers hugging, phones capturing what felt like a miracle unfolding before their eyes. One woman whispered, "It's her father." Another said, "He found his daughter through her music." Lena buried her face in her father's shoulder, breathing in the scent of safety she hadn't felt in years. "I thought you were gone," she sobbed. "I never stopped looking," he whispered back, his voice thick with tears. "Every night I played that song, hoping you'd hear it somehow." The piano sat between them like a bridge between past and present. The same piano that everyone laughed at moments ago had brought a lost family back together. As the father and daughter held each other tightly under the glow of the streetlights, the crowd began to clap again, this time softly, not for entertainment, but for love, for something pure and real. Lena pulled back slightly, looking into her father's tearful eyes, and for the first time in so many years she smiled, not a shy smile, but a full one filled with warmth and peace. The man brushed a tear from her cheek, his voice shaking. "Let's go home, sweetheart." Lena looked at the piano one last time, her fingers brushing the keys. "Thank you," she whispered to it. Then she stood holding her father's hand. As the crowd made way for them, The night air felt softer now, the cold less cruel. The laughter that once hurt her was gone, replaced by hope. For the first time in years, Lena wasn't just surviving, she was found, and she was home. The next morning, the city woke to the sound of the same piano, but this time the notes were softer, more peaceful. The night before had changed everything. A video of the homeless girl pianist had already gone viral, spreading across every social platform. But Lena didn't know that yet. She was sitting beside her father in a small cafe a few blocks from the street where they'd reunited. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate, steam rising and warming her cold face. Her father, Richard, sat across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. It felt unreal to him, years of searching, endless nights replaying the same melody in empty concert halls, all leading to this quiet moment. Lena, alive and sitting in front of him. Her hair was still messy, her clothes still worn, but to him she looked perfect. He reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly. "You really remember the song?" he said softly. She nodded, her voice quiet. "Mom played it every night." A sad smile crossed her lips. "She said it made her feel like you were still with us." Richard swallowed hard, his throat tight. "I wrote that piece the night before the fire," he whispered. "It was meant for your recital." His eyes filled with pain. "When I found out the apartment burned down, they told me no one made it out." Lena looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the cup. "I woke up in the hospital," she said. "They said my mother didn't make it. I tried to find you, but..." Her voice broke. "I was too young and no one believed me when I said I had a father who was a composer." Richard's heart shattered again. But this time it wasn't from loss, it was from the weight of all those lost years. All the moments they could have shared. "I should have never stopped searching beyond the city," he said quietly. "I was so sure you were gone." Outside the cafe, people were already gathering near the same piano, pointing at the spot where Lena had played. Someone had left flowers on the bench, a small note tucked beneath the petals that read, "You reminded us that beauty can come from pain." When they stepped outside, the winter sun peeked through the clouds. The same street that had once felt cruel now shimmered with warmth. Even the vendor who used to chase her away smiled at her shyly. "Morning, young lady," he said. "Didn't know we had a celebrity living on our block." Lena blushed, hiding her face behind her hair. Her father smiled at the kindness she was finally receiving. A reporter approached them holding a microphone. "Sir, is it true you're the father of the homeless pianist?" Richard nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "I'm her father, and she's no longer homeless." The reporter turned to Lena. "Do you plan to play again?" she asked. Lena hesitated, glancing at the old piano across the street. "Maybe," she said softly. "Music is all I have left." Her father smiled gently. "No, sweetheart," he said, "it's not all you have left. You have me now." Later that day, Richard took her to a small music hall where he used to perform. Dust floated through the air, golden in the light from the high windows. The grand piano at the center gleamed softly. Lena approached it slowly, her reflection rippling across the polished black surface. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. The room fell silent, her father watching from the doorway. "Play it," he whispered. "Play Lena's song one more time." She did. Her fingers moved with grace and confidence, the sound filling the empty hall. Each note seemed to lift years of sadness from her heart. Halfway through, she felt tears on her cheeks, but she kept playing. The music wasn't just a song anymore, it was her life. Her mother's love, her father's hope, all stitched into sound when she finished. Her father clapped quietly, tears in his eyes. "You're even better than your mother was," he said softly. She smiled shyly. "She taught me everything." That night, Richard made a promise to himself. He wouldn't just bring his daughter home. He would bring her music to the world. The next morning, he contacted an old friend from a recording studio, arranging a small performance to reintroduce Lena, not as the girl who lived on the streets, but as the pianist who moved hearts with a single song. As they left the hall, Lena turned back for one last look at the piano. She smiled softly, whispering, "Thank you." Her father looked at her confused. "For what?" "For never giving up on me," she said. Her voice was quiet but filled with warmth. The wind brushed past them as they stepped outside, carrying with it a faint echo of the melody she had just played. Somewhere it felt like her mother was listening, smiling from afar, proud of the girl who had turned pain into music. and silence into a story. The whole world would soon hear. The world moved faster than Lena could have imagined. Within days, her story was everywhere. On phones, televisions, and newspapers, people called her the street pianist, the girl who reunited with her father through a song. Videos of her performance filled every platform. Some showed her trembling hands on the keys. Others captured the moment her father ran through the crowd. Her story had become a symbol of hope, of second chances, but fame felt strange. After so many years of being unseen, the sudden attention made Lena nervous. She wasn't used to clean clothes, warm rooms, or cameras following her everywhere. Sometimes, when she woke up in her father's apartment, she would sit up fast, forgetting where she was. Her body remembered the cold streets, the hunger, the fear. Even if her heart was now learning peace, Richard watched her carefully. He didn't push her to perform or to speak publicly. He just stayed close, quietly protecting her like he'd always wished he could. Yet even as they settled into a new life together, a part of Lena couldn't rest. There was still a piece missing. A quiet voice whispering inside her, her mother's voice. One evening, as she sat beside the same street piano where it all began, a small crowd formed again. Not as strangers this time, but as admirers. Someone had cleaned the piano, polishing its edges and repairing a few broken keys. A small plaque now sat above it, dedicated to Lena, who reminded us that music has no home, only a heart. Lena smiled when she read it. Her father stood a few steps away, talking to a reporter. She sat on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. This time she didn't play Lena's song. She began something new. A melody soft and unfamiliar. Her fingers moved gently, shaping notes from the memories of her mother's laughter and the sound of rain on their old window. As she played, she saw people gathering again. Not with laughter or mockery, but with respect. A woman placed a single white flower near the piano. A man dropped a note that said, "For your mother, who taught you love through sound." When the last note faded, the applause was softer this time, thoughtful, honest. Lena looked up and saw a familiar face at the back of the crowd. It was the violinist who had once played beside her father years ago. His name was David. He stepped forward and smiled warmly. "You play like her," he said quietly. "Like your mother?" Lena froze. "You knew her?" she asked. Her voice was fragile. As if afraid to hope again, David nodded. "I did," he said. "Your mother was the heart of every song your father ever wrote." He looked over at Richard, who had turned to face him, emotion flickering in his eyes. "We used to play together before the fire." Lena blinked back tears. "She talked about you," she whispered. "She said her favorite thing was hearing you and Dad perform together." David smiled sadly. "She was the best pianist I ever met," he said softly. "And now, it looks like you've taken her place." Her father stepped closer, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "You should join us," he said. "Lena's playing again. We're recording her first performance tomorrow night." Lena's eyes widened. "Tomorrow?" she asked nervously. "Dad, I don't think I'm ready for a stage." Richard smiled gently. "You've already played for the world once," he said. "You can do it again, but this time under lights, not street lamps." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. The thought of standing before a real audience again made her chest tighten. But every time she felt afraid, she remembered her mother's words. "When the world forgets you, play." Morning came too soon. The theater was small but full. Reporters filled the aisles. And her story was printed in every program. From Streets to Symphony, the miracle of Lena's song. As the lights dimmed, she sat at the piano with her father beside her, David standing nearby with his violin. The stage lights felt warm on her skin. She took a deep breath, her fingers hovering above the keys. The first notes echoed through the hall. Soft, trembling, beautiful. She played with her heart open, every sound a mixture of pain and peace. When David joined in with the violin, the melody lifted, filling every corner with warmth. Her father closed his eyes, smiling as he heard the two halves of his past, his wife and his daughter, blended in perfect harmony. When the last note faded, the audience stood, clapping through tears. Some shouted her name, others just cried. Lena turned to her father, her lips shaking as she whispered, "She's here, isn't she?" He nodded, tears running down his cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "She's been here all along." Lena looked up toward the ceiling lights, her heart swelling. The sound of applause surrounded her, but she wasn't thinking about the crowd. She was thinking about the promise her music had kept, to never let love fade, not even through loss. And as she stood and bowed beside her father and David, she realized this wasn't just her comeback. It was her mother's final encore, played through her hands, through her heart, through every note that would live forever. The applause from that night still echoed in Lena's dreams. She could hear the violin blending with her piano, her father's proud smile flashing under the stage lights. For the first time in years, she slept in a real bed, the blankets soft and warm, the air filled with peace instead of fear. But as dawn broke, she woke with her heart racing. There was a strange feeling in her chest, a pull, as if the music from the concert wasn't finished yet. Downstairs, the television was already playing clips from the performance. News anchors spoke with awe. The miracle pianist, Lena Matthews, performed live for the first time, touching millions around the world. The screen showed her smiling shyly under the spotlight. The comments scrolling across the bottom read things like, "She's an angel," and "Her story gives me hope." Richard turned the volume down as she entered the room. "Morning, sweetheart," he said softly. "You were incredible last night." He handed her a plate of breakfast. Warm toast and scrambled eggs. Lena smiled. "I didn't think I could do it," she whispered. "But once I started, it felt like she was there, Mom." Her father nodded, his eyes soft. "She was," he said. "She always will be." They sat together in quiet comfort. But soon there was a knock at the door. Richard frowned, opening it to find a young woman holding a folder and a camera bag. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Sarah from the Global Herald. We'd love to interview Lena if she's ready." Lena's heart skipped. She wasn't sure she liked the idea of cameras and bright lights again, but something inside her whispered that this was important. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "but not in a studio. I want to talk by the piano." A few hours later, they sat by the same street piano that had started it all. The winter sunlight glowed over the keys. The crowd that gathered wasn't as large this time, but their faces were kind, respectful. A few children sat cross-legged on the pavement, waiting for her to play. Sarah turned on the camera. "Lena," she began, "your story has inspired millions, but we want to know, what keeps you going?" Lena smiled faintly. "Music," she said softly, "and the memory of my mother." Her eyes drifted toward her father standing nearby. She used to say that every note carries a piece of your soul when I play. I feel like I'm still talking to her. Sarah's eyes glistened as she nodded. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "Would you play something for us?" Lena looked at the piano, her fingers twitching slightly. She sat down and took a slow breath. Her hands hovered above the keys. And then she began. The melody that flowed was gentle, full of hope and longing, not as sad as before, but deeper, wiser. The children in the front row leaned closer, their eyes wide when she finished. The sound of applause was small but heartfelt. Sarah wiped her eyes, whispering, "Thank you." But before they could pack up, an older man approached through the crowd, holding a worn leather notebook. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I'm sorry to interrupt." He looked at Lena, his eyes full of emotion. "I'm the owner of this piano." Lena blinked in surprise. "You are?" He nodded, smiling. "It was my wife's," he said. "She played it every day before she passed away. After she was gone, I couldn't bear to take it home, so I left it here, hoping someone would find joy in it again." He opened the notebook, showing old photos of his wife, smiling beside the same piano years ago. "When I saw you playing it on the news, I cried," he said. "You brought her piano back to life. You gave her memory a voice again." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I just needed somewhere to play." The old man chuckled softly. "And you did, my dear, better than anyone could." He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "This piano belongs to you now." Lena froze. "What?" He smiled warmly. "You've given it purpose again. Take it, play it, keep it alive." Her father stepped forward. "Speechless, sir, that's—" The old man raised his hand. "No need for thanks. I've heard what she can do. I've seen what her music does to people. It deserves to be played by her hands." Lena stood slowly, emotion flooding through her. "I'll take care of it," she whispered. "I promise." The crowd clapped quietly as the man walked away. Leaving her with tears in her eyes, she sat back down and touched the piano lovingly, whispering, "You've carried so many stories. Thank you for carrying mine too." That evening, her father arranged for the piano to be transported to the concert hall where she practiced. The movers carefully lifted it, wrapping it in soft covers as the truck drove away. Lena stood watching it disappear into the distance. Richard placed an arm around her shoulders. "You see?" he said softly. "Even instruments find their way home." Lena smiled faintly, her voice quiet, just like us. And as the last light of day touched the sky, she whispered to the wind, "This time I'll play for all the hearts that never stop believing." She didn't know it yet, but her next performance, played on that same piano, would soon become the most watched moment in history. A song that would reach hearts across the world and remind them that no one, not even the forgotten, is truly lost. The concert hall was silent, thousands of people waiting. Cameras from news stations lined the edges, their red lights blinking like tiny stars. It had been weeks since Lena received the piano from the old man, and tonight, for the first time, she would play it on a grand stage. The instrument looked almost out of place under the spotlight. Worn wood, faint scratches, chipped paint. But that piano had history, and Lena wouldn't trade it for any polished concert grand in the world. Backstage, her father watched her quietly. She stood by the curtain, dressed in a simple white gown, her fingers tracing the edge of the piano key pendant around her neck. It was the only thing she had left from her mother, a charm once given to her on her 8th birthday. "You ready, sweetheart?" Richard asked softly. Lena nodded, though her heart thumped like a drum inside her chest. "I'm nervous," she admitted, "not because of the crowd, but because I don't want to let her down." Her father smiled gently. "Your mother would be proud no matter what," he said. "She always said music isn't about perfection, it's about truth. And no one plays truth like you do." The stage manager called her name. The curtain rose slowly, revealing the full audience. Thousands of faces lit by anticipation. The applause started before she even sat down. Echoing like waves through the hall, Lena bowed once, her hands trembling slightly as she sat at the piano. The seat creaked softly, and the microphone above her head caught the faint sound of her breathing. When she pressed the first key, the note rang out pure and haunting. The hall went silent again. She started with Lena's song, her father's melody, but halfway through, she began to improvise, letting her emotions guide her. The new notes poured out like light breaking through clouds, slow, tender, then swelling into something bigger, a symphony of her life. Each note told a part of her story. From hunger and pain to discovery and love. As she played, she felt her mother's presence stronger than ever. It wasn't imagination. It was something deep, something real. Her fingers moved on their own. As if guided by unseen hands, the melody wrapped around the audience like a soft embrace. Then something unexpected happened in the middle of the piece. The theater lights flickered softly, not out of error, but as if responding to the rhythm. The audience gasped, but no one looked away. A beam of light from above caught the piano perfectly, dust motes swirling like golden snow. Lena's eyes filled with tears as her music climbed higher. Her mother's favorite part, the notes that always made her laugh when they played together. A single tear rolled down her cheek, falling on the ivory key beneath her hand. She didn't stop. She couldn't. When the last note echoed through the hall, there was silence. Not because they didn't want to clap, but because no one could move. It was like everyone was holding their breath, afraid to break the moment. Then a voice from the back whispered, "Bravo!" Soft but clear. It spread through the hall one by one until everyone was standing. The applause roared, thunderous and endless. People were crying openly, strangers hugging each other. Even the cameramen wiped their eyes. Lena looked toward the audience and spotted something that made her heart stop. In the front row sat the old man, the piano's former owner. Tears streaming down his face, he mouthed, "Thank you," and pressed his hand to his chest. Richard walked onto the stage, his eyes shining with pride. He wrapped his arms around his daughter as the audience continued to cheer. "You did it," he whispered. "You finished what we started." She leaned against him, exhausted but glowing. "I think she was here," she whispered back. "Mom," he nodded, his own voice breaking. "I know she was." The orchestra behind them began to rise, one by one, clapping and bowing toward her. The conductor stepped forward, shaking her hand with tears in his eyes. "I've heard masters play," he said softly, "but tonight, we heard a soul speak." When Lena finally stepped off stage, reporters crowded near, microphones and flashes filling the hallway. But for once, she didn't shrink back. She smiled shyly and said, "This isn't my story alone. It's a story for anyone who's ever been forgotten, for anyone who's lost hope. Her words spread across the world within hours. Clips from the concert were uploaded, and soon millions were watching. Across continents and languages, people wrote comments saying her music made them cry, made them believe again. That night, as Lena sat on her apartment balcony, she looked up at the stars. Her father had fallen asleep in the next room, the TV still playing footage from her concert. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Mom, I played your song. I hope you heard it." A gentle wind brushed her face, carrying the faint sound of a piano key, away soft, distant, almost like a reply. She smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Good night," she whispered, and somewhere far beyond the stars, her mother's melody lingered, floating through the quiet night, reminding the world, and Lena, that music could heal even the deepest wounds, and that love, once found, never truly fades. The morning after her breathtaking concert, the city felt different. The air seemed softer, the people gentler. As sunlight poured through the curtains of her apartment, Lena slowly opened her eyes. For the first time in years, she woke not to hunger or fear but to peace. The faint hum of the city below blended with birdsong. It was a melody all its own. Her father was already awake, standing by the window, sipping coffee. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You're famous now, sweetheart," he said with a warm smile. "They're calling you the heart of the streets." Lena laughed softly. "That sounds strange," she said, pulling her hair into a loose braid. "I was just playing what I felt." Richard set his mug down and walked toward her, pride glowing in his eyes. "You didn't just play, Lena," he said. "You made the world listen." Later that day, their living room filled with light as a steady stream of calls and messages came in. Invitations from orchestras, charities, music schools. Everyone wanted to meet her, but Lena wasn't thinking about fame. Her thoughts kept drifting back to that night, to the flicker of lights, the old piano glowing under the spotlight. The moment she felt her mother's presence by afternoon, she and her father were invited to a charity event dedicated to street children. The organizer said they wanted her to play again, this time for those who lived the life she once had. Lena didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." The event was held outdoors in the city plaza, not far from where she had once slept beside the piano. Now a proper stage had been built there, decorated with lanterns and garlands. Children from shelters sat in the front row, their faces glowing with curiosity. Behind them were people from all walks of life, business owners, teachers, artists, strangers who had followed her story online. The piano, her piano, stood proudly at the center of the stage, polished but unchanged. It carried the marks of its journey and the scratches, the dents, the stories it held deep within its wood. Lena touched it gently, whispering, "We're home again." Her father stood by the stage, watching with misty eyes. When the lights dimmed and silence settled, Lena took her seat. She looked out at the sea of faces, faces that once might have walked past her without a glance. Now they waited for her to play, to speak through music once more. The first note she played was soft as breath, a lullaby almost. It drifted through the plaza like a whisper of hope. The children leaned closer, their eyes wide. The melody rose, slow and beautiful, telling a story without words, of struggle, loss, and finding light again. Halfway through, something amazing happened. The crowd began to hum along softly, following her rhythm. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed, but it was real. A harmony born from hundreds of hearts beating together. Lena smiled through tears as she continued, the sound around her growing fuller, warmer, stronger. When the last note faded, there was a long, peaceful silence before the applause began. The children stood and clapped the loudest, shouting her name. "Lena! Lena!" Some even ran up to the stage, hugging her legs. One little boy looked up at her and said, "When I grow up, I want to play like you." She knelt and smiled at him. "Then promise me something," she said softly. "Never stop playing, no matter what happens. Music doesn't care where you come from, it only cares about your heart." The boy nodded seriously, and she ruffled his hair. Her father watched from the crowd. His chest swelling with pride, he whispered to himself, "She's not just playing music anymore. She's changing lives." Later that evening, when the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Lena stayed behind. Sitting alone at the piano, the city glowed around her. The same streets that had once ignored her now sparkled with warmth. She pressed one last key, letting the sound linger. "Mom," she whispered. "I did it, I really did." A soft breeze swept across the plaza, carrying with it the faint scent of lilies. Her mother's favorite flower, she smiled, closing her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind. Her father walked up quietly behind her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Lena looked up at the stars before nodding. "Yes, but this time, I'm not leaving the piano behind," he chuckled. "Of course not. It's part of the family now." As they walked away together, the camera lights from a distance caught one final image. The girl who once played in the cold now walking hand in hand with her father under the soft glow of the city she had transformed. The piano stood alone in the plaza, a symbol of everything she had overcome. A small sign placed next to it read, "Once she was unheard, then she played. Now the world listens." And from that night on, the street piano was never silent again. Musicians, children, and dreamers came from everywhere to touch its keys, each one leaving behind a little melody of their own, continuing Lena's song, a song of hope, love, and the beautiful sound of being found.